بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. لم تقترن بزمان وهي تخبرنا، لم تقترن بزمان وهي تخبرنا عن المعاد وعن عاد وعن إرم، عن المعاد وعن عاد وعن إرم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. دامت لدينا ففاقت كل معجزة، دامت لدينا ففاقت كل معجزة من النبيين إذ جاءت ولم تدومي، من النبيين إذ جاءت ولم تدومي. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. محكمات فما يبقين من شبه، محكمات فما يبقين من شبه الذي شقاق ولا يبغين من حكم، الذي شقاق ولا يبغين من حكم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. ما حوربت قط إلا عاد من حرب، ما حوربت قط إلا عاد من حرب. أعد الأعادي إليها ملقي السام، أعد الأعادي إليها ملقي السلم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. ردت بلاغتها دعوى معارضها، ردت بلاغتها دعوى معارضها. رد الغيور يد الجاني عن الحرم، رد الغيور يد الجاني عن الحرم. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. لها معان كموج البحر في مدد، لها معان كموج البحر في مدد وفوق جوهره في الحسن والقيم وفوق جوهره في الحسن والقيم مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم فما تعد ولا تحصى عجائبها فما تعد ولا تحصى عجائبها ولا تسام على الإكثار بالسمي ولا تسام على الإكثار بالسامي مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم قرت بها عين قارئها فقلت له قرت بها عين قارئها فقلت له لقد ظفرت بحبل الله فاعتصمي لقد ظفرت بحبل الله فاعتصمي مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. أما بعد. مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم. Most respected elders, beloved mu'takifin, mothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We continue with the 6th chapter of Qaseedah Burdah, which is discussing the honor and the nobility of the Quran Kareem. Allama Busairi rahmatullahi states, "Lam taqtarin bi zamanin wa hiya tukhbiruna anil ma'adi wa an 'adin wa an irami." In the previous poems, he stated that the Quran Kareem is the kalam of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is eternal. The sifat, the qualities of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala are also eternal. Kalam, speech of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala being the quality of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is also eternal. So therefore, the speech of Allah being eternal is not confined and not limited to any time and era. And he says that the Quran, it is not connected. The speech of Allah is not attached with any period of time, but at the same time, it informs us about ma'ad, the future, wa an 'ad. It also tells us about the nation of Ad, powerful nation that came in the past, and it also tells us about Iram, and also a nation that came in the past. In other words, the Quran is so powerful, so dynamic, and it is so rich in its content that it tells us, give us information of the past, where otherwise we would get such information. It tells us about the information of the future, of the present, and it also tells us about the future. And everything is reliable, everything is authentic. And in this way, we can be able to shape our minds about the past, shape our mind for the present, and shape our mind for the future. It is stated that Iram, he is a grandson of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. Ad, he is then the grandson of Iram. And we heard of a famous incident about the famous king of Iraq, Shaddad. When he heard about the descriptions of Jannah, how beautiful is Jannah, when a person passes away, then if Almighty Allah is happy with him, that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala will put him into Jannat and paradise. When he heard the description of Jannat, he thought that he could make his Jannat in this world. He used all the resources as a king to prepare beautiful palatial palaces. And a large portion of his life was spent in that. When the appointed time came for him to enter his palace, that is when Malakul Maut came and took his life away. And that is why some ash'ar, some poets, they explain it in beautiful ways, that Ruh-e-Shaddad ki jab nikali gayi, Ruh-e-Shaddad ki jab nikali gayi, haath malta gaya aur ye kehta gaya, aisi jannat ka kya bharosa. When the time came for him to leave this dunya, whole life is spent in putting up beautiful palaces. But now the time came for him to enjoy. It is as though he was placing his palm with his palm and say regret, out of regret, what bharosa and what trust can we have on this dunya. Allama Busairi goes on further, he says, Damat ladayna fafaqat kulla mu'jizatin minan nabiyyina iz ja'at walam tadumi. The translation, the verses of the Quran-e-Kareem, they remain with us forever. Therefore, it is superior to every miracle. In comparison to the miracles of the other prophets, when they came with their miracles, then the miracles did not remain after they left this world. In these two poems, Allama Busairi rahmatullahi speaks about or indicates, refers to the previous prophets also performed miracles. And obviously, their miracles wasn't for their self-status and to just gain some self-confidence or some acceptance in people for personal gain. It was purely for the sake of da'wah. So that people could get attracted to them, and then they will use that opportunity to convey to the people Tawheed, the oneness of Almighty Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. But all the prophets who performed miracles in the past, it was confined to their time and era. When they passed away, that was the end of the miracle. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also performed many miracles, but the miracle of the Quran-e-Kareem, the miracle that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala has given in the form of the Quran-e-Kareem to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that remained even after the demise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, the Quran is actually a living miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muhkamatun fama yabqina min shubahin lizi shiqaqin wala yabghina min hakami. Muhkamat, it is an academic term. The plural is a plural of muhkama, and it refers to a degree of expressing oneself. In the books of fiqh, in order to explain muhkama, they present the different degrees and different categories of expressing one's speech. Nas, Zahir, Mufassar, Muhkam. One degree of expressing yourself, Nas. Little higher degree, more clearer, Zahir. Even more clearer than that, Mufassar. And such clarity in which there is no doubt whatsoever, that is called Muhkam. And the ayat of the Quran-e-Kareem, every ayat in the Muhkama, therefore in plural, Allama Busairi says Muhkamatun. The verses of the Quran-e-Kareem are absolutely clear and So they do not leave ma yabqina min shubahin. So clear that they do not leave any doubt whatsoever. لِذِي شِقَاقٍ وَلَا يَبْغِينَ مِنْ حَكَمِ. It did not leave any doubt, any shubha for the enemies, and at the same time, the enemies, they did not require any judge to understand or to give a judgment regarding the understanding of the Quran, because the ayat of the Quran Kareem were self-explanatory and very, very clear. مَا حُورِبَتْ قَطُّ إِلَّا عَادَ مِنْ حَرَبٍ أَعْدَ الْأَعَادِي إِلَيْهَا مُلْقِي السَّلَمِ. Salami refers to two people are fighting, two nations are fighting, and they seek a truce to stop fighting. They have given it all, lost all the resources, and they come to a point where they completely give up. Contextually, Allama Busayri rahmatullahi says that there were many enemies of Islam that opposed the Quran Kareem. They tried their level best to dig holes in the Quran Kareem. They tried their level best to prove that the Quran Kareem is the word of man. It is not the word of Allah as Muhammad has claimed. They tried everything possible to dig holes in it and to tear it apart. But as enemies, they came with all their might. They came with all their forces to tear the Quran Kareem apart. But Allama Busayri says very beautifully that even the worst of enemy who opposed the Quran Kareem, fought with the Quran Kareem, went in war with the Quran Kareem, he returned from the war against the Quran Kareem seeking a truce. As though the Quran defeated him left, right and center. And now he's got nothing left, and now he's asking the Quran Kareem that do not attack me anymore. I want to enter into a truce. I don't want to fight with you anymore. In other words, the person gave up completely in front of the Quran Kareem. رَدَّتْ بَلَاغَتُهَا دَعْوَى مُعَارِضِهَا رَدَّ الْغَيُورِ يَدَ الْجَانِ عَنِ الْحَرَمِ. Ghayur, in the second poem, it refers to a person, a husband especially, who's got ghayrat in him. For example, if a person is very sensitive in protecting his wife, that's on condition the person got salimut taba. That he is sensitive to his wife, he is sensitive to the respect, chastity, dignity of his wife. Now if any person wishes to place his hand on his wife, this person, out of his sensitivity in protecting his wife, he definitely will repel that person. It's his wife, and why would he allow somebody to put his hand on his wife? So how quickly with such sensitivity the person is going to repel? In the same manner, Allama Busayri rahmatullahi gives two examples in explaining that how the Quran Kareem, how much of respect and honor the balaghat, the eloquence, the linguistics of the Quran Kareem has in it. One is the alfaz of the Quran Kareem, the message of the Quran Kareem. And one is the linguistics, the balaghat, the fasahat that the Quran Kareem contains within itself. So, just as a person would try to put his hand on somebody's wife, and the husband, out of sensitivity in protecting his wife, he would repel that person with the might and force that he has in it. Likewise, the Quran Kareem, the fasahat, the balaghat, the eloquence, the linguistics, the perfection of the linguistics that is in it. Anybody tries to put their hand on the Quran Kareem, it is as though the fasahat of the Quran, it is like a sensitive, protective husband that would repel the hands of a person that will put his hand on his wife. In the same manner, the linguistics of the Quran Kareem will repel the enemies from it. So Allama Busayri says, رَدَّتْ بَلَاغَتُهَا دَعْوَى مُعَارِضِهَا. The eloquence of the Quran Kareem rejected accusations of his objectors. Just as a respectable man, he repels the hand of a transgressor from his haram. Haram here refers to the wife. لها معان كموج البحر في مدد وفوق جوهره في الحسن والقيم. Mawj refers to the waves of the ocean. And madad here refers to the cooperation, the help and the assistance. The meaning of the Quran Kareem, or the ayats of the Quran Kareem, they are like the waves of the ocean in helping and assisting one another. And the Quran Kareem is superior to the jewels of the sea in their beauty and in the value. Now, when we observe the oceans, and we observe the waves that come, so it's one wave come, it goes down, another wave comes after that. And it's as though every wave is like in close coordination and cooperation with one another. They're helping and assisting one another to maintain that flow. The Quran Kareem is just like the waves of the ocean. One wave assisting another wave. Likewise, one ayat of the Quran Kareem is assisting another ayat of the Quran Kareem in exemplifying and presenting the message of Allah Ta'ala clearly. That is why there is a famous principle in the tafsir of the Quran Kareem. Al-Quran yufassiru ba'duhu ba'da. That one ayat of the Quran Kareem explains another ayat of the Quran Kareem. Nowadays there is a sickness of people. They want to open the Quran Kareem and they want to look at the ayat and they want to make their own deductions. Whereas the Quran is just not any manual that you can study it without understanding the sciences of the Quran Kareem. One ayat, you look at it, you can't just make your own deduction. You've got to have holistic knowledge of the Quran Kareem, the sciences of the Quran Kareem, for you to understand that ayat within a particular context. And like that, there's so many ayats of the Quran Kareem. So, just some people have the sickness of picking up the translation of the Quran Kareem, and then look at one translation of the verse, and they arrive at their own conclusions. That is a very dangerous attitude. Just by way of example, and there's so many examples that in the Quran Kareem, the example that comes to mind right now, that if a woman, na'uzu billah, married woman, she has to commit adultery. Now in one verse of the Quran Kareem, it speaks about the punishment that she must be arrested and under house arrest. وَاللَّاتِي يَأْتِينَ الْفَاحِشَ مِن نِسَائِكُمْ فَاسْتَشْهِدُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ أَرْبَعَةً مِنْكُمْ. And Allah Ta'ala speaks about that when a woman like that is found guilty, then she must be kept in the confines of her home. But then you look at another verse in the Quran Kareem in the 18th juz, الزَّانِيَةُ وَالزَّانِي فَاجْلِدُوا كُلَّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا مِئَةَ جَلْدَةٍ. And then you look at other ahadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which reached a category of tawatur, that such a woman that is married and commits adultery, then just as a male has to be stoned to death, a female also has to be stoned to death. Now if somebody has to look at one ayat in isolation, he'll come to a wrong deduction. So you have to look at it contextually, and there's so many other principles. Sometimes Allah revealed an ayat of the Quran Kareem in the beginning stage of Islam, and then that became abrogated, and then that was replaced with another ayat. So all the history behind the Quran Kareem, and that is why tafsir is taught in the Darul Ulooms. That to understand the Quran Kareem and understand the rules and the principles of deducing the laws of the Sharia of the Quran Kareem. So, as I mentioned right in the beginning, it appears Allama Busayri rahmatullahi is a great alim, and he understands the rules and the principles of making tafsir of the Quran Kareem. And he says, the ayat of the Quran Kareem, they are like the different waves of the ocean in helping and assisting one another. And further explaining that, he says that, how can we ever compare the Quran Kareem to the ocean? Where the ocean, it does have its pearls in it. It has its beauty, but the pearls of the Quran Kareem is far more beautiful and it is far more valuable than the pearls of the ocean. فَمَا تُعَدُّ وَلَا تُحْصَى عَجَائِبُهَا وَلَا تُسْأَمُ عَلَى الْإِكْثَارِ بِالسَّامِ. The first poem, very, very thought-provoking and reflects the reality of the Quran Kareem. He says that the ajaib, the peculiarities of the Quran Kareem They can never be counted and they can never be enumerated. So many peculiarities and so many wonders of Almighty Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala are found in the Quran Kareem. And let me just expand on this a little bit. Ibn Arabi, great alim of his time, he have explained that there are 77,450 words in the Quran Kareem. 77,450 words in the Quran Kareem. In one hadith, Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam reported to have mentioned, لِكُلِّ آيَةٍ ظَهْرٌ وَبَطَنٌ وَلِكُلِّ حَدٍّ مُتَّلَعٌ. Every ayat of the Quran Kareem, it has an external, it has an internal. And it has a limit, which means that it also has a top and a bottom. Just as for everything, there's a limit on the top, there's a limit on the bottom. So the ayat of the Quran Kareem, it has an external, it has an internal, it has a top, it has a bottom. In other words, every ayat of the Quran Kareem got at least 4 angles, 4 dimensions to it. Now, Ibn Arabi mentions that there's 77,450 words in the Quran Kareem. You take that and you multiply it by 4, then the principal ulum, every word, every ayat of the Quran Kareem, it represents a general ilm, a knowledge. And from there, he deduces that there are 309,800 principal ulums in the Quran Kareem. Now we will just look at it, just as the words of the Quran, just as ayat of the Quran Kareem, but go into the depth of the Quran Kareem, the principal ulum, and leave aside the subsidiary ulum, knowledge that will come out from the Quran Kareem. The principal ulum that is contained in the Quran Kareem at least is 309,800. Now, to us, we look at the Quran Kareem, where is all that ulum? Where is it found? We don't see it in the Quran Kareem. But then, hear what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala has to say. He says, Man arad al-ilm fa'alayhi bil-Qur'an. فَإِنَّ فِيهِ عِلْمَ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَالْآخِرِينَ. Anybody wants true knowledge, proper understanding of issues, hold firm to the Quran Kareem. In the Quran Kareem, there's ilm of the people of the past, there's ilm of the people of the future. Jalaluddin Suyuti rahmatullahi, he's a famous commentator of the Quran Kareem, and the Jalalain, 2 volumes that is normally taught in the Darul Ulooms, that 15 juz of the Quran Kareem is compiled by him, Jalaluddin Suyuti. There was another Jalaluddin Mahalli. So Jalaluddin Suyuti rahmatullahi, he very beautifully mentions it, say that ma min shay'in illa yumkinu istikhrajuhu min al-Quran. Any information you want, not only masail of wudu, not only masail of namaz, not only about Hajj, not only about Zakat, not only about Dini related issues, anything, any information you want which is true, proper, genuine, then it is possible to look into the Quran Kareem and be able to extract it from the Quran Kareem. Now, this may be surprising for people in the professional field. How are you going to take out information medicine from the Quran Kareem? How are you going to take out information of building from the Quran Kareem? How are you going to take out information of biology in the Quran Kareem? How are you going to take out information of probably psychology in the Quran Kareem? Whereas, it's not surprising. Indeed, everything is in the Quran Kareem. And just by way of example, let me just give a few examples that are how much of ulum there is in the Quran Kareem. You see, scientists, they used to talk about the inception of life. That where life began and how life began. How this entire world and everything in this world came into existence. And what is the ibtida and what is the beginning of life in this world. So they investigated, researched. They came to a point that the beginning of life is water. And then they discussed it through a concept of amoeba. And this is something that I remember in standard 8 in biology we used to study, amoeba and water and all those kind of things. But then, after years of research, they came to a concept that the beginning and inception of life is water. Now this is something that they have done so much and they're still investigating and they haven't come to the bottom of it. But then we are people of Iman. We are so fortunate. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala doesn't want us to make bagajmari behind all these things. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is just telling us very simply in the Quran Kareem, by this is my kalam and I'm feeding you with information. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. That every living object that it is with water. Everything. So here 1,400, 500 years ago, it was revealed upon Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that the inception of life is water. Everything related to that, and only now the scientists have discovered it. Now, we look at it. It's nothing got to do with wudu. It's got nothing to do with namaz. Not got nothing to do with shariat. But it is so rich in information that is also telling us about the inception of life. Or for example, scientists, they were talking about that they believe in investigating how this world came into existence. And how the sky went up to the sky, how the earth came at the bottom, how the mountains fell in its place, and how everything else fell into place. What was there? They went into the history of it. They came to a conclusion that the world was a gaseous mass, full of gas. And then a time came, they believed in the concept of the Big Bang Theory. That means that there was a huge bang somewhere, and that is why the sky went on top, the earth came at the bottom. The mountains went in one place, and the other things went, the other oceans went to another place. There was a big crack, and through the big crack, everything like this has happened. This is what the scientists believe in. Now, when we look and ponder into the Quran Kareem, it is ajib that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is a kitab of guidance for us to get close to Allah, not a book of science, but just for us to increase our yaqeen and conviction that the Quran is so rich in content. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala in a subordinate way, He says it, أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَنَّ اللَّهَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا. Don't you see the sky and the earth? Allah says the sky and the earth, they were locked up. Ratqan, they were locked up. فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا, and then we opened them up. Open them up means like something that was put together and how it cracked and it opened up. Now the same concept of the Big Bang Theory, we even understand it from the Quran Kareem. Now this is just to show to us that how much we should appreciate the Quran Kareem and what scientists spend millions of dollars in trying to make that research and information with absolute ease. We are able to find that in the Quran Kareem. Yes, the purpose of the Quran Kareem is not the scientific calculations. Or for example, the concept of embryology. That how a child, every human being is curious that how a child is born and how a child is formed in the womb of his mother. And the whole concept of embryology that takes place, that in the beginning 2 weeks this happened, in another 2 weeks that happened, and then another 1 month this happened, and after 3 months this happened, after 6 months the fetus is made, all that. Now, so much of research and so much of studies are done on that. Whereas, we look in the Quran Kareem, so beautifully Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says, وَالَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ مِن نُطْفَةٍ ثُمَّ مِنْ عَلَقَةٍ ثُمَّ مِنْ مُضْغَةٍ مُخَلَّقَةٍ وَغَيْرَ مُخَلَّقَةٍ. The different stages of the formation of the child in the womb of the mother, that is all mentioned in the Quran Kareem. There was a doctor in Canada, he was an embryologist, Dr. Kate Moore. He came across, he was an expert, world-renowned expert in embryology. He came across this ayat of the Quran Kareem, so he thought it was very amazing. So he and his group of people, researchers, they went over to Saudi, they went to Riyadh in the libraries, and they scanned all the books of tafsir and science and everything to find out what the Quran Kareem speaks about embryology. And when he returns to Canada, he makes a statement and he says that I haven't found any book as accurate on embryology as much as what the Quran says. And this was published in the front page of the Canadian Times. So speak about, this is the information and we should value all this being mentioned so that we can value the Quran Kareem. Or for example, we speak about recently the scientists, they were investigating that what is keeping the mountains on top of the earth. Because the mountain is a separate creation, earth is a separate creation. And what if the mountain just falls? Because especially in the context of earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. So they're investigating that and they always wanted to be on the safe side. that if the mountain is just on top of the ground and there's nothing linking the mountain to the earth, that can be very, very dangerous. The mountain can just fall off, especially if people want to have constructing houses around that area, and if the mountain just have to fall off, what will happen? So they investigated the issue. And they felt that it was quite safe to build houses around that area because mountains are not just on the earth, they are like roots of the mountain going deep down into the ground. That serve like pegs. Like how you get a peg, like it goes deep down into the ground. And when you look at the Quran Kareem, absolutely shocking and amazing. With just one word, Allah Ta'ala says that how the mountain serves as pegs, wal jibala awtada. In the 30th juz of the Quran Kareem, that Allah says, and we have made the mountains as pegs. Now, you look at a peg, that it clips into something else. So the mountain is just not on the ground, it is something that clips into the earth, and that's what makes the area around the mountains also very, very safe. Again, Allah Ta'ala is telling us, this whole thing is hidayat, guidance. And in that Allah Ta'ala is telling us about the beauty of the Quran Kareem. Take for example, in the context of building. People wonder that why in the building sector you use so much of steel. And steel normally comes out from underground, and that steel is used to erect and keep the weight of the building up. Now when they researched this, they found that there's such components in the steel that the earth cannot bear it. And it is precisely for that reason where that steel is at such component that it keeps the earth and keeps the building up. That means that the earth don't have that amount of component to create that steel, and that steel comes from somewhere else. They don't believe, although it is taken up from underground, but they believe it is extraterrestrial, it comes from somewhere else. So where did it come from? They all believe, they're unanimous, that it came from somewhere else. Up till now they investigated to find out where the steel came from. The steel that come out from underground, where does it come out from? For us, we just look in the Quran Kareem. In the chapter of Hadid, in the chapter of steel, there is a chapter of steel in the Quran Kareem. Allah says, وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدَ فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ. Anzalna, we have sent down the steel. Now, like everything else is sent down, but from this we get an understanding that the steel, it is extraterrestrial. Scientists can carry on the investigation, but the end result will be that which is mentioned in the Quran Kareem. So most respected elders, friends, the whole idea is to show to us that the Quran Kareem is just not any cheap book. Sometimes you just look at the tarjama, the translation, say, okay, that's fine. Meanwhile, you go into a depth of it, is much, much more than what beats our eyes, and much, much more than what we can understand of it. And that is why Allama Busayri says, فَمَا تُعَدُّ وَلَا تُحْصَى عَجَائِبُهَا. That the wonders and the peculiarities of the Quran Kareem, they cannot be counted, and leave aside not being counted, they cannot be even enumerated. وَلَا تُسْأَمْ عَلَى الْإِكْتَارِ بِالسَّامِ. Tus'am means to negotiate. And Sam, it refers to frustration. Now, before translating it, let me just simplify it. It is the unique quality of the Quran Kareem, characteristic of the Quran Kareem. You read it how much you want to, you'll never get frustrated. You may get tired, but you never get frustrated. And the attachment with the reading of the Quran Kareem is such, the more you read it, the more you want to read. The more you read it, the more you want to read. The more you enjoy tilawat of the Quran Kareem. So, Allama Busayri says that the Quran Kareem is such that frustration is never negotiated upon constant recitation of the Quran Kareem. In other words, that one is to conclude a deal and one is to negotiate. But the constant recitation of the Quran Kareem, leave aside concluding the deal, you can't even negotiate on it being a means of frustration. It never ever frustrates us. It is always as fresh as right from the beginning that we read the Quran Kareem. قَرَّتْ بِهَا عَيْنُ قَارِيهَا فَقُلْتُ لَهُ لَقَدْ ظَفَرْتَ بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ فَاعْتَصِمِي. The Quran Kareem, it cools the eyes of its reciter. The Quran Kareem, it cools the eyes of the reciter. So, it is as though Allama Busayri is painting a picture, one person reading the Quran Kareem, enjoying the recitation of the Quran Kareem, and then an observer is telling to the person that is reciting the Quran Kareem that لَقَدْ ظَفَرْتَ بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ فَاعْتَصِمِي. That you have succeeded with the rope of Almighty Allah. Therefore, hold steadfast onto the rope of Allah. Hold steadfast to the Quran Kareem. In this a poem, the last one, Allama Busayri rahmatullahi actually referring us to an ayat of the Quran Kareem, in which Almighty Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. That hold firm to the rope of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala and do not disagree, do not disintegrate, do not have ikhtilaf. Now, in our time and era, everybody is telling us, let's unite, let's unite. People with different thoughts, different philosophy, different ideologies. Why we need to fight? Let us unite, let us get together. Let us talk. Let us meet one another halfway. Let us unite. But then Allah, Almighty Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is telling us, yes, unity is very, very good, but there's also criteria for unity. You can't just unite like that. But there must be a criteria for unity. And let's all unite, indeed unite, but وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ. That hold firm to the rope of Allah. Let us make the Quran Kareem the criterion of our unity. And it's not only the Quran Kareem, obviously, like anything, it has a manual. So Quran Kareem also has a manual. You can't just have the Quran Kareem barring the Sunnah. The Quran Kareem has to be understood in the light of the Sunnah. And this is also understood from the Quran Kareem itself. Nowadays there's a call for many people, Quran. You call them the Ahle Quran. And even in around Durban, this fitna is spreading, the fitna of Ahle Quran. They hold only to the Quran, leave the hadith out. We got the Quran, the word of Allah, leave the hadith out. That hadith has come from a human being, na'udhu billah, they just say like that, and it's transmitted. We don't know the authenticity of it. So we want guidance, let us get pure guidance only for the Quran Kareem. This is a fallacy. Where Allah Himself says in the Quran Kareem, وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوا وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. Allah said about Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what He gives you, take it. What He doesn't give, what He tells you to stay away from, you stay away from that. وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. That person who obeyed Allah and the Rasul, there's full success in that. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ. Obey Allah. Allah doesn't confine Himself to that. He says أَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ as well. So, in order to understand the Quran Kareem, you cannot separate the hadith. The hadith is integral to the understanding of the Quran Kareem. So if somebody wants to understand the Quran Kareem barring the hadith, then his conclusion is going to be wrong. And then he can only have himself to blame. For example, if somebody bought a Mercedes Benz, now there's a manual for that car. And then you say to yourself that I'm not worried about this manual, I'll sort this car out myself. Now, he doesn't worry about the manual of the car, how to deal with the car, how to drive the car, anything has to happen. He does his own thing. That car probably will last maybe less than a month and the car will finish, brand new car. But you follow that manual of running that car, then that car will be a beautiful means of conveyance for the person. Or for example, you've got a BMW. Now the BMW agent told you to use the manual for the BMW in dealing with this and that and the electronics of the car. Now you go and use a Mercedes manual for a BMW, see what happens? The car will never ever work. Every car got a manual. Or for example, in the electronics at home, you got a Defy, and you go use a Samsung manual for that thing, what's going to happen? Or for example, in that computers, if you got an Apple computer, and you use a manual of another computer to dealing with this Apple computer, that computer will never function. Everything has a manual and it must be operated according to its manual. Likewise, the Quran Kareem, it has a manual, and the manual of understanding the Quran Kareem is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allama Busayri rahmatullahi concludes with this and explains about if a person got the Quran Kareem, indeed is successful. So hold firm to that. Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq. We'll continue it after. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.